First up, we have Batgirl's Beatdown ability. Batgirl performs a series of quick strikes on a single enemy to deal massive damage. If you notice, this ability is in the top row. Everything in the top row is worth 1 momentum point, and everything in the bottom row is worth 2 outside of the drone. What's really great about this ability is you get to use it right out of the gate. When you get to the Belfry for the first time, you'll be asked to unlock Perfect Evade, which generates momentum and allows for a perfect attack follow-up. And now that you're able to do that, the game gives you this ability to start. So all you have to do to get this one is progress through the beginning of the tutorial. This ability for sure suits Batgirl because she's a tank-type character. Especially once you start progressing, you'll have no problem being in the middle of a fight. And because this isn't a long-range attack, that's exactly what you'll need to do. Because this is a single enemy attack, you're going to have to choose wisely who you use it against. I'll typically reserve this one for the faction bosses. It allows you to lock into them and deal a string of damage. Each individual hit really only deals an average amount of damage, but when you add it all up, it becomes really significant. Batgirl has 2 skills that could be used to buff this up. The first is Elite Beatdown. This one really leans into her tank abilities. With this one, the enemy will no longer be able to knock you out of your beatdown once it starts. This is really great for when you want to use it but you have a bunch of enemies left. And on top of that, you get a 20% boost on your defense when using beatdown. So even when you do get hit by the other enemies, the damage will be minimized. The second skill that boosts this ability is the Piercing Beatdown. This is one of her abilities that lets her stop armored attacks. Armored attacks are the ones where the enemy's attack turns red and are generally unblockable. With this skill activated, you're able to interrupt those attacks, and instead of taking damage, you can start dealing damage of your own. The bottom line is this is a great attack to use on larger enemies, especially once you get Elite Beatdown and can't be knocked out of your ability. Next up is Batgirl's Batarang Barrage. Batgirl attacks all enemies with a storm of Batarangs. This will likely be the second ability that you get. All you have to do is progress through the story until you get to case 1.4, Blackgate Blues. After you break into Blackgate and talk to Harley, you'll have to make your way down to the archives. Along the way, you're going to go through another tutorial mission, and this one's for the Piercing ability. Like we just talked about, Piercing abilities are the ones that can interrupt your enemy's red attacks. When you get to this point, you'll have to face the Mob Faction boss. Whenever you see her hands turn red, go ahead and use your Batarang Barrage, and you should pass this tutorial no problem. This move does some solid damage, but also has a fairly wide area of attack. So it's a great move to use on anybody at any time, but specifically crowds. That said, even though it covers a sizable area, it's still not a 360-degree move. Because of that, you're going to have to pay attention to who's in front of you before you use it. You're going to want as many enemies in front of you as you can to really maximize this one. Like we talked about before, this move has a piercing ability, which means you can interrupt armored attacks if you see them coming. So if you're in a pinch and you see that red attack coming, use this and it'll take care of it. Finally, it works real well on those hard-to-hit enemies. Some enemies, like Feral Talons or Drone Specialists, are real hard to hit. So usually you'll have to use your heavy Batarang on those guys. This is basically the same thing, except it does way more damage and it has a way larger spread. So long story short, this is a great move that deals plenty of damage to multiple enemies. Next is Batgirl's Elemental Strike. Batgirl performs a heavy melee attack that deals massive elemental damage and has Guard Break. To get this one, you're going to complete the Guard Breaker challenge. Take out 5 Bulldozers, who are the mini-boss for the Freak faction, and you'll unlock this ability. At first, you're really only going to find them in the Freak Premeditated Crimes. To get more premeditated crimes, make sure you're collecting as many clues as possible. But once you do get a Freak Premeditated Crime, you can count at least 1 being there, if not 2. But if you're completing this challenge later in the game, you can even get them in normal crimes. This attack does a huge amount of damage, but also elemental damage. That said, this is a single enemy attack, so you'll have to make sure that you choose your target wisely, and also make sure that you're not in a situation where you may accidentally hit a weaker enemy and waste your attack. Like I said earlier, it also has a guard break aspect to it, so specifically with the mini-bosses, you can break through their defenses and start your combo. Also, the elemental damage should not be overlooked. If you didn't know, each faction has a weakness to a different element. So if you know you're going to be fighting a certain type of faction, you can choose the correct element to give you an extra edge. Long story short, this attack does a ton of damage and also elemental damage, which could be targeted towards the enemy that you're fighting. Next on our list is the Adrenaline Surge. This ability increases Batgirl's damage, critical chance, critical damage, and defense by plus 20%, and elemental effect buildup by plus 50% for 12 seconds. You get this one by completing the Shadow Perch Challenge, where you have to clear out 2 owl's nests, so nothing too crazy, but it doesn't become available until after mission 3.1 The Key. Owl's nests are marked with this symbol on the map. Each one of these will be behind one of these green secret passageways and will usually consist of 2 waves. This ability is obviously a stat boost, so once you use it, you're able to run in, cause more damage, and take more damage. And because Batgirl's already a tank, this ability is right up her alley. And on top of that, it does boost your fear too, so enemies aren't going to be as eager to attack you and may actually run away. Bottom line is this may not be the flashiest ability, but if you think you're about to walk into a big fight, this is definitely worth activating. Next up is the Tonfa Jackhammer. Batgirl hits the ground twice with her Tonfa, creating a circular wave of damage that knocks back and staggers nearby enemies. You get this one by completing the Ferocious Challenge, which you gain access to during Mission 3.2. This is the challenge where you see the Feral Talons for the first time. You're going to have to take down 15 of them to complete this mission. To find Talons, you're going to have to make sure that you're in an area that has a Court of Owls presence, and your best bet is always premeditated crimes. That said, even smaller crimes in the Court of Owl districts can still have Talons. This momentum ability is amazing. It does massive damage but also has massive coverage. This attack has a full 360 degree radius, which means it's a great attack to use if you've lured a whole bunch of enemies into an area, or you get in over your head. Either way, everybody's getting hit. That said, it doesn't have the most range, so when you do go to use it, make sure that your enemies are pretty close. Beyond just the radius of this attack, it does a large amount of damage. I've found that it's on par with the Elemental Strike, however it's going to hit way more people. This attack also works great to clear out enemies. To be honest, you want to get as many people as you can in this attack, and because of the high amount of damage it does, it really takes down a lot of enemies. Bottom line is this is one of Batgirl's best attacks. It has a wide radius and does a ton of damage, but you just need to make sure that your enemies are close enough to be effective. Next up is the Marauderangs. Batgirl throws 2 Batarangs that spin around an area, striking multiple times and preventing some enemies from attacking. To get this one, you're going to have to complete the In Plain Sight challenge, where you have to defeat 5 League of Shadows assassins who can be found at these premeditated crimes. Of course, further on in the game, they show up more frequently in smaller crimes too. This one does a fair amount of damage, but it's continuous damage, and it's damage on top of what you're already doing as Batgirl. When you get further on, you're able to take people out with these for sure, but again, the big draw is that they're continuous, so the damage really adds up and it makes it difficult for enemies trying to do things. This is specifically tailored to the League of Shadows assassins, where it takes away their ability to disappear in that puff of smoke. Now I have found that they don't work great against the Feral Talons because they dodge so much, so if you're facing them down, don't waste the points. Outside of that, I think it's a great attack. It does a fair amount of damage, and it's also continuous damage on top of what you're already doing. Next we're going to skip ahead to Batgirl's drone. Batgirl calls her drone, which heals allies and shoots at nearby enemies for a short period of time. You get this one by completing your knighthood challenges, so you should be able to get this one towards the beginning of the game. To get that, all you have to do is complete time strike training, stop 4 premeditated crimes, and defeat 3 mini-bosses. This one's a little different because it's your ultimate. Instead of costing any momentum points, it's a cooldown of 6 minutes. The drone's not much in the way of damage, but it is great to take some pressure off Batgirl and heal her and her allies. On top of that, Batgirl has 2 skills that can buff up this drone. The first is Drone Firepower, which increases the firing rate of the drone. This is great because again, the idea is to take pressure off Batgirl. More shots fired is more enemies interrupted. Then there's the Drone Ambush Blast. Once per summon, Batgirl's drone unleashes a large burst of damage on all nearby enemies. Again, I wasn't getting an enormous amount of damage out of this move, but it is great to back off some enemies. Finally, we have Bat Swarm. Batgirl unleashes a swarm of bats, dealing damage to nearby enemies and protecting her from most damage. Getting this one can be a bit of a grind, but it can be done. First, you're going to have to complete Barbara's story, which will require you to go to these yellow bat symbols whenever they pop up. These are all just cutscenes, so progress through the story, collect these whenever they show up, and once you get them all, you'll get the Drone Expert Challenge. To complete this challenge, you'll have to defeat 20 enemies with your drone. These can be any enemies, which is great, so you're going to want to focus on the weaker, more common enemies to maximize your kills. Same as the Marauderangs, this one doesn't do a ton of damage, but it's continuous damage and it's damage on top of the damage that you're already doing as Batgirl. However, unlike the Marauderangs, because this one has a full 360 degree radius, it creates a shield for you as well. Also, because of the radius on this one, it does a great job of hitting enemies that like to dodge, like the Drone Specialist and the Feral Talon. Lastly, it has a fear aspect that makes the enemies hesitate and run away. So the bottom line is this move's really great if you're going to be in the middle of a bunch of people. It's a shield that does damage, causes fear, and gives Batgirl the room to do her thing. So that is all of Batgirl's momentum abilities. Thanks for sticking around till the end, and if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe.